Welcome to Reality NSFW. I am your host, Alex Trias, while Johnny and Matt are away at the viewing party for the finale of Survivor 41. We are here to break it all down, and I'm here with some special guests. You know her from the Deep Dive podcast, as well as the Challenge and Challenge All-Star podcast. We have Lauren Pratt. Lauren, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Alex. Excited to talk about this finale. I think there's a lot of good elements to this season, and it kind of came full circle. And congratulations, first off, to Erica. I just wish in the editing we saw a little bit more of her gameplay, but I'm excited to break it all down with both of you.
And we've had a guest on this podcast for made guest appearances on Deep Dive, on Challenge podcasts in the past. We have Dan Montchal. Dan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I just want to hear from the people that are still saying that this is the worst Survivor season ever, because I don't see it.
Oh, absolutely. I know a lot of people, and even a lot of former Survivor people have their thoughts on this season and stuff, certain things about it that make it the worst season for them. I enjoyed this season throughout. Did I have my issues with some of the twists? Sure. Do I have a bit of a problem that the twists also sort of led to two of the final three to be in the final three? Maybe a little bit. But, with all jokes aside, it was a very strong final three. One of the strongest ones we've had in a long time in the history of final threes, in my opinion. And we have our first woman winner since Sarah Lucina in Game Changers in Erica. First Filipino winner, first Canadian winner. It's a great day to be Erica.
Oh, yeah. Erica came away with a boatload of cash with that. And I will say, going into the final tribal council, I absolutely agree with you, Alex. Strong contenders, all three of them. And we'll get to how I think some of them fumbled it, and that's why they're not a winner, and that's why Erica's a winner. But we'll get to that point, and I'm excited to talk about that mostly.
Yeah, Dan, your thoughts on the winner?
I think Erica played a really strong game, as kind of Lauren led in her opening comments about wishing you could see more of it. I do as well, but I think that when you got to see some of her final tribal council and how well she was respected, and you saw little tidbits throughout the season, they weren't necessarily right out in front of you, but I think that's okay. I don't think in order to be a great season that your winner has to be a main character. I think it's all right if they're more secondary, if it fits with the overall story that you're trying to tell.
I think that's something that, like, when I'm able to take a step back, I can understand your logic there. I'm someone with the belief of, if you don't think that your winner is a main character, you should at least make a more balanced edit so that everyone gets a little bit of shine, because we'll say it how it is. There was a handful of players on this season that got the bulk load of the shine. There was people who should have gotten more. Like, I do believe Erica should have gotten more, because the confessionals we got meant something every single time we got. And maybe that's something that we should be looking out for, is who's getting the content that's actually necessary and is leading somewhere. Because her and Ricard didn't get a lot of confessionals, but when they had confessionals, they made it count. But we saw the shine of Deshaun, we saw the shine of Xander, Shan. Like, those were the focal points for them. Evie at the beginning of the season. But we're gonna break this all down. We got a little over 2 hours worth of game to break down, and we'll start with the post Danny boot. It's now final 5. It's the final push. Everyone sort of knows what's going on here. It's a new beach, very bad conditions, no limited food, limited shelter, but Xander feels great about it. Xander's like, I want everyone to suffer. Like, they can suffer not eating, not drinking. I can eat off just pure adrenaline and push forward. And what we're really seeing here is the highlight of Ricard needs to be the person to go, but there's a conflict with everyone with how everything happened at that tribal with Deshaun. And they're like, can we even trust him enough to even bring him to Final Four?
Right. I mean, there's a lot you have to factor in. You're coming back from an intense vote off and then going to a new beach, which I'm all for them going to the new beach because there's a couple of days left. That's another element that they're trying to utilize to break them down. And Xander making that confessional, he's like, if it breaks everyone else down, I'm able to go in full steam ahead and perform well. That's what you have to do that close to the end, is make people question, can I actually do this? Is this something that I'm able to last through? Because regardless of this, everyone has said this season hasn't rained at all. It definitely has rained. They're just not showing it to us. And that's clear. But they got pummeled that night. And it was a disaster. They were breaking down. But at the same time, mentally being able to tell yourself that I can get through this moment in order to increase my chances of performing better the next day, therefore pushing myself even further down the line in this game. And I think Xander was someone that was able to articulate that to the audience, what exactly was going on.
Well, and to your point, I think we're obviously going to have a lot to say about Xander over the course of this podcast, but I think you can kind of see it's things like that, why production really did love him, and he got a really positive edit, was because he was giving those positive clips that they could show. And it's something that you want to hear, like, yes, this may suck, but we only have 2 days left. And if you can't be pumped and play hard at the final 5, then they shouldn't be out there to begin with.
Right. Like Xander, let's be honest, he's Jeff Prost's wet dream of what he is looking for in Survivor contestants. They're young, excited, ready to do anything, will not complain a lick about anything that's happening in the game because they're just pure excited to play the game, and take whatever production throws at them. And at the same time, while being young, is good in confessional, is able to very clearly dictate what he's trying to do, does it in an entertaining fashion. Like, I think they found in him what they were hoping they could continue to get from like a Devin Pinto in Triple H. Because it's that sort of similar archetype. They could get very far into the game through just their likability, and they are strong in challenges, can find advantages. They have a lot of things that can check off the box of what production is looking for.
Well, and that's a big thing as well. You can talk about if they are going to get confessionals and more of them, if they are able to have really good sound bites, they're going to be shown more on our screen. And that's what Xander was able to provide. He always had good sound bites, always was energetic in his confessionals. And that's something that I don't want to take it away from Erica. I think what Erica was saying was all great. She was showcasing what she was doing in the game and everything. But what Xander was able to do to separate himself from her in terms of, I think, getting more screen time was he was energetic. He was always making people laugh, and he was always engaging more so with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. But speaking on Erica, like we have this sort of discussion about how she's having a hard time taking the personal side away from what Deshawn did at Tribal. And because not only did it impact her actual game, it's impacting, or she believes it's impacting her relationship with Heather, who's upset just over the experience. We find out later on it's not because of Erica saying it, it's just for how Deshawn dropped it. Because I think Heather is someone who can understand the game and can understand that Erica was playing well at that point and could be a danger. So she was probably having similar thoughts, but it's just how Deshawn just threw that narrative out there that really made the impression that they were both now fractured. And now Erica's not really sure where she can even go at the moment because she thinks she no longer has Heather because Heather's not talking to her. She can't trust Deshawn. She trusts Ricard, but knows that he needs to go. And then you just have Xander there.
But can't that also be pointed out is that's a very good thing and goes in the plus column for Deshawn, because he was someone who was clearly at the bottom, and you can agree or disagree with what he did at Tribal last week. There's multiple thoughts, but his end goal actually did work. He was able to survive that. He moved on to the final 5. And at the same time, he's having all this mistrust and doubt spread throughout the rest of the tribe that I don't think would have been there had he just stood pat.
Yeah. Right. And I'm all for fighters at Tribal Council, especially because he was trying to lay it all out there. He's essentially doing everything he can to make sure he sees another day. And it got painted in a very negative light. And I understand why so. But at the same time, he still survived. Erica and everyone else could have changed their mind in that instant and decided to vote him out instead. And they still went with voting out Danny. So that tells you something right there, that even though he might not have necessarily did the truth bomb as good as he wanted to, it still helped him survive somehow, because if it didn't, he would have been sent home.
And I think that's one of the great things about this season is, are there great players in the cast? Yes, but nobody's perfect. And you haven't seen anyone play a perfect game. And I think that's what really makes it interesting to watch. Like, I mean, when it comes to perfect games, Kim Spradlin's thrown up there for One World. No one enjoyed watching that season. It's fun watching these contestants where they're not perfect, they're not perfectly polished, and they're out there being vulnerable, and you see all sorts of sides to them.
Right. And like you also bring up a point of like the Kim Spradlins, the Danny Boatwrights of the world, what people need to understand is like it's sort of there is truth of what Xander said at Final Tribal. You don't have to play like Tony. Like it's impossible. No one else can play Tony's game but Tony. Like you can't have that just chaotic nature. Yes, you have the Mike Holloways who just win, get all the way to the end. Ben flashing immunity idols left and right, but people have this perception now that they need to go in, they need a resume, they need big flashy moves, they need like what we see that they drive on the show as, oh, those are the things you need to win. What I appreciate about Erica's game here is it calls back to everyone who's complaining about the old school game. Like, oh, I wish they would go back to basics. I wish, outside her smashing an hourglass, which, every other player would have done, including the people that are complaining about the hourglass twist, including us. If we were there, we would have hit it too. She had a more old school approach, I feel, with some nuance into how she did her social game in a new school fashion.
And also, I want to talk about flaw in this game, because for me, if you have a little bit of flaw, that shows that you have adaptability to be able to change that and make an impact in order to further yourself within the game. So if you play this almighty perfect game, and then you even see it when people return for a future season, they're not able to do that anymore because all of a sudden, guess what? Oh, they're on the bottom. They've never experienced being on the bottom before. So if you have a little bit of flaw, that shows me that you're even a better player, because what are you going to do with that? I'm going to maneuver my way around and figure out how to get back on top.
Absolutely. And in order to get back on top, sometimes you have to win stuff. And right before we have our challenge for Final Five, we find a tree mail letter that they all had to open together. And it's a clue for an advantage. They don't know what it's for. Could be an idol, could be an extra vote, could be an idol nullifier. We don't know what it is. But they have to unscramble and decipher a code. And once you have officially, I guess, figured it out, which I don't know, we will need background on how they were able to get the okay to start running around and looking for the advantage. But we do see that it unscrambles to say your treasure hangs where the leaves love to dance. And everyone's figuring out, like all the guys figure it out. They're racing around. Heather figures it out. She goes, Erica, who's we know is good at puzzles, is having a hard time. But it was almost to her benefit that she was last, because it looked like the advantage was not far from camp, and you see everyone else just spread out. And because she's last, she gets to be a little bit more methodical. She comes up with the advantage.
Well, and I think that worked out really well for her, as you had Ricard running around saying, all right, like as long as Deshaun doesn't find it, we'll be fine. And then Deshaun saying the same thing about Ricard. And I think it had those two in particular, and somewhat Xander, because he got off second and was running, that they kind of went running around with the chicken with their head cut off. And I think a little bit of time gave Erica, all right, like stand back. They clearly aren't finding it. And I'd like to hear more about that, as maybe that just gave her more time to think, where else could this be? Because clearly them running around the outsides of the beach, it's not there.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that gave her a second to step back and assess the situation and then see where they have already gone, because clearly they didn't find it. Because I actually think if other people would have found it, they would have told the entire group, whereas she chose to keep that close to her chest. And I have to say, I actually didn't mind this twist at all. I thought it was good because it was a little mini challenge before the challenge. Everyone had an opportunity to find this. Everyone had a chance. So I think it was fine to have it right before the Final Five challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't have that big of a problem with it. I didn't have a problem with what the actual advantage was. Because ultimately, like, it's a puzzle at the end. If you're not good at puzzles, it doesn't matter if you are able to start right at the puzzle, you won't win it. But she only tells, I believe, Heather and Ricard, at least on camera, about it. And they're like, should we tell Deshawn? And Ricard and Eric are both like, no. let them get tired. Let them not have like a good mindset, be very fatigued going into this challenge. I think that's also good gameplay. If you want to ensure that someone doesn't win, make sure that they're exhausted as possible.
Yeah, and I think it's little things like that where it's not over the top flashy. It's not the sound bites that, Xander's getting, but it's these small little moves that continue to always put her in the right spot, in the right situation. And that's why she won the game.
Yes, and I love how you just used the word flashy, because I do think a lot of viewers, that's what they look for. They want to see this flashy, in-your-face type of game, and that's just not her game style, and you have to respect that, because what she was able to do was incredible, especially in this finale, because I think a lot of people didn't think that she was going to get to the end, nor do as well as she did at Final Tribal Council.
Yeah. So you're saying you didn't like when CBS released everyone's resume a few hours before the finale?
That was so stupid.
That was something that I was like, why did this happen? I mean, that's the new thing, I guess, since it is season 41, right?
Well, and Alex brought it up that this seems a lot more old school the way that she won. And I think this exactly just shows it. She didn't have this big flashy resume, but you don't need a big flashy resume to win this game. And as much as, Jeff Probst and the show wants to push that out there, it's about doing the little things right and putting yourself in the right situation. And that's way more important than finding advantages and making these big blind sides. It's making sure that you're always in the right spot at the right time.
Absolutely. Both great points. And that will lead us into the Final 5 immunity challenge. Erica reveals that she has the advantage. And so you have to collect rope rungs to build a ladder. Once you build that ladder, you then have to maneuver your last puzzle piece through a second ladder. And then you complete a 70-plus piece puzzle. Erica's advantage is for each step, there's about, I think, like there was 7 rings and 7 parts that they had to maneuver. The first 4 for both were already completed for her, which is a good advantage. Like, it's not nothing, but I also didn't feel it was too much.
No, right. I don't think it was a guarantee that she was going to win, which is really what you want to see. Is you want to see someone that, okay, clearly this is an advantage, but not, well, Erica found the scavenger hunt, so she automatically wins Final 5.
However, I will say I think it was crucial that she did have that advantage, because it was getting down to the nitty-gritty with that puzzle at the end. And I think that if she didn't have it, it would have been very, very close. And if not, maybe Ricard would have pulled it out there. So I do think that advantage absolutely mattered for Erica to get the win at that immunity challenge.
Mm-hmm. And spoiler alert, Erica wins the immunity challenge.
Oh, my bad. Sorry, no spoilers.
Oh, no. And I know there's a lot of discourse in the chat right now asking about how understanding why Erica won, but why didn't Xander win? Xander almost played some of their opinions a near flawless game. We will get to why he didn't win. I have my opinions. I don't think he played a bad game by any means, but there are things in his decision making and perception, which Erica pitched throughout these last few episodes, is crucial. Perception is reality in this game. And unfortunately for him, he had a perception from the jury that was going to make it extremely difficult for him to gather votes, as well as his misunderstanding his own perception of what the jury was thinking. Yeah. But back to the challenge. I like the challenge. We see Xander has to go back to eventually get a rope. But what I like about all these competitions is there's long enough where everyone can get a chance to get into the game. Whether or not they have a chance to win is regardless. Like Heather wasn't going to win these challenges, but she was at least able to get to the point, the end part of the challenge. I like when it's more competitive.
It was competitive, but I guess, Lauren, you said that Ricard could have come back. And I think that he wasn't that far behind, but I think if you saw the last flashes when it was going, he still wasn't all that close to winning.
Yeah, I feel like he still had like I think he still had like 20 some
Yeah.
pieces left.
So while I do
Right.
agree that it was a big advantage for Erica and probably the reason that she won, she still potentially could have won it because, like I said, I still think she had at least a minute or two before Ricard got as close as where she was.
Right, but I was mostly saying I think it was still crucial for her to have that advantage, and I said it could have been a lot closer, and he might have been able to squeak out the win. But you also have to factor in how tiring it is to get the ropes off, and then how tiring it is to like move the thing up that ladder piece. So she had such a crucial advantage with not having to worry about getting tired out there, and then she's coming into the puzzle with a little bit of a clear headed mind to be able to complete that, because exhaustion matters and you have to be able to think on your feet to solve a puzzle. And so I think that does play a factor.
Absolutely. And let's not forget before we move on from the challenge, as Jeff reminds us once again, Heather is in last, but damn it, she is trying. She's never going to give up.
Well, they made sure to put that on the receipt as well for the promo heading into tonight. Always tried her hardest. I feel for you, Heather. It's not fun getting. It almost feels like you're getting picked on, even though it's not meant to be getting picked on. But yeah, Erica wins. She gets the reward also of steak, veggies, wine, and bread. But you know what? What's better than having it by yourself? Having it with someone else. And of course she picks Heather. Like, obvious choice. Gotta mend that friendship.
Yeah, I think you have to mend the friendship, and at that point they need to see where the game's going to move forward. And I think at that thought, well, if Ricard, Deshaun, or Xander are there, this is going to help fuel them, where it's probably not going to fuel Heather to a win. So I think it even puts Erica in a better chance potentially in the Final Four challenge, because it's not feeding some of these guys that have done a lot better in challenges so far this season.
Right. When she did say, though, we had a rough tribal council, part of me was like, hey, for entertainment purposes, I'll just take Deshaun to come eat with me. Like, knew that wasn't going to happen. But at least you got that little, her saying, we had a rough tribal. And then clip 2, I'm going to take Heather, which honestly, best decision. That's the person that she should have taken. It was a no-brainer.
Yeah, there's really no other choice there. You want the 3 guys to be there because you know that 3 guys aren't going to do a plan to take out Heather.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that just wasn't going to happen. You just knew what the layout was and what the perception was. And perception was it's going to be Ricard or Deshaun, because obviously Xander's finally going to have to play his idol, and he's going to play it on himself. So just let them stew at camp. We can chill, and we can make our decision on, do we go with who personally hurt us or who we like but no, we can't beat.
Also, she probably couldn't take Xander because Xander wouldn't have been able to, enjoy that wine.
Oh, he could have gotten milk.
G rules.
I know, but see, Jeff didn't even lay it out on the table that it was an option to have apple juice or anything there. He just strictly said wine. So I think that just canceled Xander from being an option to go.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I think was nice seeing, and it's something that a lot of the trolls on the internet can benefit from, that despite the fact that Deshaun and Ricard are going after each other, they don't have to be assholes to each other. They can still know that, hey, it's okay to have your views and we're going after each other, but that's just part of the game. It's not that big of a deal.
Right. Absolutely. But yeah, we sort of and I sort of already hashed what the conversation was between Erica and Heather. And ultimately we see that they came to the conclusion that while personally we would have more pleasure getting rid of Deshaun here, the vote has to be Ricard. And we see Deshaun like, yeah, if they take me out instead of Ricard, they're like, it's just idiotic at this point. Like, it is what it is. But the clear person to take out is Ricard. And Xander's on board with this. Like, he's good with this. And Ricard's now starting to sniff it out. Like, he thought maybe there was a chance that the relationships he cultivated with Heather and Erica and Xander would be enough to get rid of Deshaun, and then they could just all figure it out at 4. But he's noticing that, Erica, you're questioning? But what's there to question about? If you're good with me, we should just keep moving forward. Like, you know what? Like, this was Ricard's swan song, but I would be damned to say that he didn't play this round as best as he could. Like, when you're that out in front, when the perception is that real of you're the winner if you get to the end. It's almost impossible if you don't have that immunity to get through this vote.
Right. I don't think he could have done it any better, in my opinion. He was still trying to work those relationships that he had with everyone, having those deep, intimate moments, especially with Xander. And all of that was real. Like, he wanted to be able to open up to Xander and say, this is what I've been going through the entire time that I've been out there. And I thought it was a phenomenal moment for all of us to see. I will say the editors, they tried their absolute best to make us still think that Deshaun was an option, but they made the right call by targeting Ricard. That's just my opinion. I think Ricard would have smoked them all.
Well, that was the right call, and Deshaun wasn't the person to go. And Dan, I'm going to let you speak, but with this question in mind, like we do see then the conundrum. Like we get Ricard revealed about his second child that's on the way. But should be, like, if everything went exactly how it was supposed to, would be born 1 week after the finale, or their finale. And you see it get to Xander, and Xander also, and we discovered this bromance that was with Xander and Ricard through this late part of this game. And we see Xander questioning, do I make a move here? Like, I know the move's Ricard, and I know it would be a mistake to let him in, but using my idol, not for me, because I know I don't truly need it, and using it on Ricard would show that, like, I had control of this round. And I'm sitting back in my couch like, what the hell are you talking about, Xander? Like, if you do that, that is one of the worst moves you could make this season. And I feel bad because I like Xander. I liked his game, but like, there's so many things that he was putting out there that just was like, dude, why are you saying this? Just shut up, move forward. You, like, there's a lot of these things you're thinking of is you just getting hungry to do like something flashy, which is the problem. But I think it's also part of the reason why he doesn't get votes at the end. And I want to challenge you with this, Dan. Dangling safety this late in the game to someone, like, you're giving them this glimmer of hope when they really shouldn't have any. Then you go to tribal, you don't do it, they go home. Like, I feel like that puts an extra sting to the vote out.
It's a bad move. It's a bad move. Social. You could see at that point, because Ricard wasn't the one that went to Xander that was like, hey, play your idol for me. There was no reason for him to offer that up, which I think you saw a string of how that travel played out, where not only was he stringing Ricard along, but then he just played it for himself in a weird way that I don't think it made him look any better. Like, if anything, I think it all made him look a little worse in the jury's eyes. And then I guess just circling back to it is they did try to give us that whole, well, maybe Xander will make this awful decision. I think it was pretty much set in stone as soon as he got the music when it was talking about Ricard. It was like the same music that they were giving Zeke and Game Changers and a few other times, that it pretty much sealed his fate.
Yeah.
I just want to say, it's one thing to think it, it's another to say it. And I agree that adds that extra sting on Ricard when you're like, I might consider saving you. And then I really think Xander was considering it slightly. But at the end of the day, Xander knows he can't take Ricard. And then you're going to have everyone on the jury, if he were to do that move, saying, Ricard convinced you to play an idol on him, saving him in the game. They're going to give that move to Ricard, not to Xander, because Ricard would have been able to say, like, get in a little good with Xander, you know, have that conversation, pull out the heartstrings a little bit. That's Ricard's move. That's not Xander's move. And I think that is where Xander's read was incorrect. And we'll get to the reads when we get to the final tribal council, because Alex, I think that's what you're going to talk about a little bit there. But I will say I didn't like either when he did the play for himself, because it made Ricard think for a second, oh no, maybe he is going to play it for me. And then all of a sudden he's like, I'm going to play it for myself. He should have just went up there and said, you know what, Jeff, using my idol, playing it for me tonight. And that could have been the end of it.
Yeah, and for the viewers right now that are saying that Xander was the winner by far, the jury didn't agree with you. And we're not here trying to discredit and tear apart Xander's game. But we're also not going to lie and say that everything he did was perfect. There were flaws in his game because there was no perfect player here. That was a flaw. And you can't just, it's good to say it in confessional and just like let it out there, because that's your time to free think. But once you start saying it to people without being pushed to say it, because when you get pushed to say it, there's a way for you to back out, be like, oh, I sort of felt forced into having to say this answer because you were like putting me in this position. Here, they're actively saying, I can save you right now. Like, what if we do that instead?
So I was going to save to pose this question for both of you at Final Tribal. It isn't regards to Final Tribal, but since the chat really wants to talk about Xander and how he should have won, I want to pose a question to both of you. Because as you mentioned, Alex, before, that Xander winning, Jeff Probst's wet dream. Loves it. He's the young alpha, but you think about it. He's the young alpha male. He's an underdog the whole season. He is taking all these risks, going after all these idols and advantages that production and Probst clearly want him to do, and he's giving him sound bites. So is it just possible that he was getting a favorable edit because he was embracing everything that Survivor wanted, and maybe a more favorable edit than what he potentially deserved?
So, go ahead. You go ahead, Alex.
You
want me to go? I'll go first. So I want to say, I actually think Xander played a great game. He risked a lot to be able to get where he was, and he took chances when he needed to take chances. But what it comes down to for me at Final Tribal Council is being able to fully articulate the game that you play and being able to honestly answer questions that come at you from the jury members. And I think he stuttered way too much, had to think about way too many of the questions, and wasn't able to fully explain what he did in the game. I do think if Xander was able to say to the jury, this is exactly what I did in the game, own every single move, I do think Xander could have gotten votes, but he just didn't do that based on what we were shown. Obviously, we have to remember, we are not seeing the full tribal council that they are showing us. Those last, in what we have heard, over 2+ hours. We were seeing maybe 10 minutes of it. So yes, I think Xander played a great game, but I don't think he was able to deliver what he did at the Final Tribal Council.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to say like he was given a favorable edit just because they liked him. I feel for the most part, a majority of this cast got a favorable edit because I think they wanted that, they enjoyed this cast. Like, production and Jeff have made it very clear they loved this cast. So I don't think they wanted to really put a real stink on any of them. Like, that's why they didn't really play Ricard off as a villain or like a villain archetype. Because, like, if you for all intents and purposes, he was a villain of the season, whether what your context of a villain is. I think Xander was there at the end game. He had advantages, so he had to be part of the early part of the discussion in the edit. And then, like you said, everyone loves a good underdog story, and viewers are going to get pissed when the underdog that they choose to be their champion doesn't win. Like, because Eric was an underdog too, and at the end of the game, Deshaun was an underdog. Like, there was multiple underdogs in this story, and it's a lot easier to edit an underdog than someone who's just in the middle and existing. Like, that's why, unfortunately, like, a Heather doesn't get an edit, because to them, they felt Heather was just there. Everyone else, and like Erica's kept going up higher and higher as the season gone on, like a Michelle Fitzgerald type edit. One early at the beginning, so it wasn't really edited that much, and then kept coming more and more into focal point. Xander was just in a position where he was losing at the beginning, so you had to get the edit. Then they wanted to edit Yase as this big underdog rootable group, so you're going to get more of Xander. And then he was an underdog throughout the post-merge. But I think the perception was from the jury that he didn't control anything. They didn't see him as a threat. They thought so much so that they didn't even bother to try to get rid of his idol because they didn't think it was necessary to get rid of his idol.
Well, and I agree with what you're saying. And to be clear, I by no means was saying I think Xander was a bad player. I think he did a lot of good things in the game, and he was a lot smarter than I think they originally realized. I just wanted to pose the question.
No, right. For sure. And can I add, I also think all three of them have some sort of an underdog story because none of them were at the top of the game for the entire season. All of them had experiences from playing from the bottom, being able to dig themselves out of the bottom to get to the final three. But in terms of Xander, a lot of people, he's going to have a ton of fans. I am a Xander fan. I enjoyed watching him play during this season. But again, it just comes down to, are you able to deliver in front of that jury at Final Tribal Council for them to buy that you played the best game? You might have on paper played the best game, but if you can't showcase it to them, you're not going to get their vote.
Well, yeah, and you know what? And a great example here is an age-old question: heroes versus villains. Sandra Diaz-Twine wins the game, but isn't the flashy player. Is extremely under-edited. Probably one of the lower edits of a winner, period, outside of a Natalie White. Russell's this big focal point, doing the big flashy stuff, just being there, being the big face. So a lot of people thought Russell should have won the game from the viewer's standpoint because we were hearing Russell's story. But they under-edited the winner, which then... So my issue is, if you're directing hate, the hate needs to go towards production and how they decided to edit the show. That's my issue, Dan, with an under-edited winner, is it leaves frustration for fans because they're watching these other people get this big edit, and you're like, did I just waste my time? Because I've been seeing Xander all over the place this whole season, and now he doesn't win. He doesn't even get a vote to win. Like, I'm pissed off now. Like, why did this person win when we're being told through the viewer's point that, oh, Xander's the one playing the best game?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we keep going along, we are going to see that he isn't playing this flawless game that maybe you'd think. Like, and I'm sure as we keep going, we'll break that down a little bit more. But like I said, I think all players in this season were flawed, and that's what makes the game interesting.
The last thing before we move on to the next segment, I also want to talk about luck for a moment, because so much of Survivor relies on luck. If Erica wasn't in that situation to smash the hourglass, I think she could have potentially, most likely, been voted out during that round. But that is Survivor. That is her capitalizing on what the show is. Everyone is in a position where they're going to benefit from some type of luck. There's no way you get to the end of the game without a little bit of that. So if people are upset, as we've said, about the edit and about who won the game, you also just have to look at, there's so many different things that they have to edit within the season. It was a great cast overall. So they were making sure to highlight as many different people. Other seasons that we watch, not as many people are getting this much screen time, but because this cast was so phenomenal, that's why they had to spread the love a little bit.
Yeah. And, you know, we will be talking about Xander more later in this podcast, but I want to spend some time now giving our final thoughts on Ricard. And because we see ultimately Ricard go in this tribal, he goes out in 5th place, 7th member of the jury. And this whole tribal was sort of set up production-wise to really highlight Ricard. Like, even though he wasn't getting the confessional count, he was in the episodes. Like, he was the moves. Like, he was a big reason why actually that Erica and Xander were able to get that alliance of the underdogs together, because he was the focal point. He became the person spearheading it to go against Leanna, Danny, Deshawn, and Shan. Like, getting Shan out was Ricard's move, which also restructured the power structure. And we could go back and forth whether or not that was the correct move or not at that point in time. It's very hard to know for sure. But we get to really hear them both, like, you know, Ricard gets to get a chance to brag. He's like, I feel I played very well. I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of the game that I played. I feel I could have possibly now be even on the pantheon of some of the best games and players to not win. I don't like the sort of slight dig at Sari, though, from Jeff saying some of our best players will never win the game. But I think ultimately it was a good send-off, and it was also, I think, a focal point, just like they did with Shan. I feel this was that production also trying to say, like, hey, Ricard is on the for sure list for whenever we call for returning players.
Well, and I think this tribal council, it shows exactly why every episode doesn't need to end with a blindside. It's okay if we know what's coming ahead of time if you tell the story right. And I think that's what they really leaned into with Ricard is, yes, it's going to become more and more obvious that he's unfortunately going to be the one that goes. But if you're telling the full arc of his story, you don't need to be surprised by the vote. Like, tell us everything that's important to his story, which I think they really let him do when he, was just going for 2-3 minutes talking about how proud he is of himself and everything that he's accomplished in this game. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Right. I think the only flaw is he was able to get into a spot where it made it so people could actively say he was playing the best game, which isn't the best game. If people are saying you're playing the best game, you can't get yourself to the end, then you didn't play the best game. But you did play a very strong game. I feel he was at least, and Edit can be saying something, but I felt reading how votes went and looking through the votes and dissecting episodes that he was a big focal point for how multitude of vote outs happened. There's a reason why he's able to survive with Shan throughout all of UA, getting rid of Brad, getting rid of JD, getting rid of Genie. You get rid of Nasir. That was his call, not Shan's, not anyone else's. It was his call to get rid of Nasir. It was his call to get rid of Shan. The only move that he wasn't able to truly get done that he wanted himself was getting Deshaun out, which comes back to bite him that he wasn't able to get that done. But I truly loved watching Ricard. I loved watching him play this game. I hope that in a second time around they give us more of more what he wants the viewers to see, because I think even he would say, I don't think they showed what I would have liked them to have shown of me, which you get from everyone. But I feel like he's going to be one of those favorites from this season. I would have liked to have gotten more of him.
Right. And I'm glad at that moment they were able to highlight his experience, how he felt that he played the game, because he did play the game very well. But he didn't get to the end, and so therefore he's not the winner of the season. I will say, someone asked earlier in the chat why he didn't play the shot in the dark. The reason why he didn't play the shot in the dark is because it expired at Final 6, so he no longer had that power to be able to save himself, potentially at 5. But overall, I think really with Ricard, he just got into a position where he couldn't lower his threat level at all. And I think that is something that if he could have maybe done, maybe squeaks by the final 5 vote, but I highly doubt it. He had to win that immunity challenge to even have a chance to get to the end of this game.
Yeah. So we see him go ultimately in 5th. It's now, they go for a very crappy night. I think the Fiji gods were mad that Ricard went out, so they gave them a storm. And they had no shelter to hide themselves in, so they wake up the next day and they're just like raw skin, like completely wrecked clothes. They're all exhausted going in. And now it's just like we get right before the challenge, and it's really just like everyone just wants to win. They don't want to have to go and make fire, especially Deshaun.
I find that interesting, though, not wanting to go make fire, because I actually think making fire is sometimes a benefit to your game. Now, it just obviously depends on the season, and we'll talk about it when it gets to that moment, because I 100% have a take on what should have occurred with this fire making challenge going into the final 3 slot, but I think you both will probably agree with my stance on that.
Yeah,
no, it's completely fair.
Yeah, so we're now at Final 4 immunity, and once again, then like for people who want to go play Survivor, last handful of Final immunity challenges has been this type of challenge. You're on a rickety board that's going to move, and you have to place blocks on another rickety platform while maintaining balance with both yourself and with that platform to keep the blocks up. It has to read Final 3. You have to get past the line. Once you get past the line for a brief moment, you win immunity. You are safe. You are guaranteed Final 3. And you'll be choosing who makes fire and who's coming to you with you to the end in the second position. I love this challenge.
I mean, clearly they just wanted to pay tribute to, the Survivor god that Chris Underwood was.
Yes. I will say the reason why I do like this challenge is because you're at the end game. And this challenge requires you to not only be able to balance and everything, but mostly mentally stay focused. And if your brain is fried, if you're tired, if you're hungry, it's going to be very difficult to keep yourself focused because you're paying attention to two different things, having to grab the block and then having to maneuver yourself down to place the block. It's a lot to all take in at once.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see really the two main people that were at it were Xander and Erica at first. Then it was Erica and Deshaun sort of in second place, but really it was Xander all the way. He never, I don't think he drops it all throughout this. He may have dropped at the very beginning.
The beginning.
At the very beginning, he dropped, I think, when he had 2, and then we didn't see him drop again.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, very dominant performance overall. Xander gets that win. It's his second immunity win. He's guaranteed final 3. And you know what? It was a really great moment for him. He felt just like it's a long time coming. We get some backstory on him that he was a chubby kid when he was younger, loves competition though, found his love and passion for cross country. But this is what he was meant to do, was come out here, play Survivor, do everything that he could possibly dream he could do on Survivor, because he used to believe this was never going to be an opportunity for him.
Now, this moment right here, who do you think it meant more to? Him or Jeff? Because Jeff was very, very intrigued to have Xander as the winner. In my opinion, he was very hyped about it.
Well, it's always going to be Jeff that's going to be more hyped about it. But I think it also was good because we've talked about it. We get a lot of these sound bites from Xander, and, you know, he's very good in his confessionals, and we've seen a lot of his rooting interest. We really haven't gotten to see a lot of his backstory at all, or any, like a lot of the others got the Australian Survivor, like this was what they were practicing at home, or what it was like when they found out, or whatever may it be, like the flashback. And he never really got that from Xander. So it was nice to see at least a little bit of his background before coming out there.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Did everyone get a flashback this season?
I don't think everyone did, but at least the people that I think saw something or had a good enough story did. But I think majority did.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think majority did. Maybe a few were mixed in the shuffle there, but it was good to see that moment from Xander, because as a viewer, you want to dive deep into where people come from, what they do, what they have grown up to become. And so I think that just was a good moment for Xander.
Yeah, and that brings up a point. And I know like some people in the chat mentioned it too. It's for some, not for me, because I do feel connected with this cast, but some don't feel as connected because a lot of the beginning portion of the game, while we did get those moments, a lot of it was just reading advantages, reading twists. We had to have segments about the hourglass, have to have segments about the do or die. Like, you have this stuff in here that some people feel isn't as needed or doesn't need to have as much time as it's given. And by having those in there, you're taking away from already limited 40-plus minute episode of really diving into people and who they are, because that's what gets people to root for people. So you're obviously going to end up rooting for the people that are edited more because you get to hear more of their story. And I think that could also be another reason why some people aren't as thrilled with the winner, even though if you go based off gameplay and what we should just infer, I guess, at this point, and maybe that's part of the problem is that we have to infer the gameplay is, you know, it just leaves a bad taste in some people's mouths because they're here to watch people's stories while also playing a game.
Right. But you also have to appreciate that from so many viewers out there because everyone's rooting for somebody different. And that to me just shows passion from people because they want to see the person who they've been cheering for basically all season long to win. And so the fact that people are upset about it, that's okay because their person that they were cheering for didn't win. But I will say so many people were cheering for Erica to win. It's just you're not going to like everyone all the time. Yeah. That's why it's so hit or miss with people liking specific winners. Some people have this person top tier and some people have them right at the bottom. So it's all depending on what you're looking for as a viewer. And that's what makes it so unique because it's okay not to like every single person.
Yep. Yeah. And so going back to the episode where now having to figure out who Xander's going to put into fire making. And his original plan is he's going to put Deshaun and Heather in there. Hopefully Heather beats Deshawn, because then Heather and Erica have the same story. So if they have the same story, I can then be on top, like past them. And then I'm also not giving Erica the chance to win by fire and have another flashy point. Oh, Dan.
And here comes the first big X on Xander. He played a perfect game in his decision right here.
Honestly, but it's like, it's the problem with having Final Four fire making as like it's an absolute, because now this is the second straight non-returning season where the winner of the season gets brought to the end, but there's the perception of, oh, well, let's not make them make fire. Like, let's not give them the bonus of winning it. And so there's this, but then you also have that people thinking that they need to do it because they're like, well, Natalie didn't win because she didn't give up her immunity and go make fire. Chris Underwood won because he won immunity, then gave it up to make fire and won in fire making, which then got him votes. It's like, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. But we even saw earlier in this season, final 4 votes, final 3 votes can still be very exciting. And while the final 4 fire making did deliver in this finale, it's still not necessary. If people know who they want to vote out to get to the end, and if it's forced, like, we could have had a Deshawn Erica fire making because Deshawn and Xander go to vote out Erica, and the other 2 go to vote out Deshawn, and then they're making fire that way. Or we see a blind side and we see Heather vote out Erica with them, because even Heather told Xander, the only person who could really beat you at the end, if you're sitting next to them, is Erica. So you need to put her in fire, and I'll even do the fire against her and win. And then you don't have Erica there anymore.
Exactly. I mean, they had insight. Xander had insight into every single person's strategy, saying Erica's a threat. Erica's the only person, in their opinion, that could beat him going into that final tribal council. And I think what the main issue here with Xander was not going with his gut. He was thinking about it so hardcore, watching Erica attempting to make fire and saying to himself, should I take her out? And he talked about pulling the trigger and all this stuff. He needed to pull the trigger right then and there. Yes, it's a risk, but at the same time, I think what really hurt him is just not realizing how much people respected the game that Erica was playing.
Right. And like, in theory, if we just go based off theory, his logic makes sense if you believe that the jury perception for you is also strong. Like, if you think both of you are looked well by the jury, you don't want to give them that extra bonus of like, oh, I go in, I make fire, now they may be above me. So by not putting her in that position, yes, you're guaranteeing that she's sitting there with you, but you're like, but I brought her here. Like, it was because of me that she's here. It's not because of herself. So I can understand his logic. It's just the idiocy of me of Final Four final making or fire making itself, not exactly his move, but obviously ends up hurting him. But I don't want to be results oriented about it.
But to his credit, think about this real quick. He was still able to explain why he took Erica there. He said, I didn't want to have her going in, making fire, and then having the opportunity to beat someone and then sit at Final Tribal Council to have another check mark on her list of a reason why she should win. But that wouldn't have happened if he went against her. Now, if she went against somebody else, I do think that would have been another check mark for her. But if he's heavily considering it that much, just go for it, because what's the difference between getting 4th place versus getting 0 votes in the end? In my opinion, there is no difference.
There's a pay difference, but outside that,
that's fair, but still.
But you also have to understand that at this point in time, in his perception, he thinks he's played a winning game, and obviously there's a lot of viewers out there who think he played a winning game too. But it doesn't matter what we all think; it matters what 8 jurors think. But there is a moment where he's like, oh, maybe I take my necklace off, I go and face her. Honestly, between those 2 options, he made the right move. I still believe in just sending Deshawn there and Heather if his goal was not to give Erica another check mark. Then mission accomplished. He did what he wanted to do. Unfortunately, Deshaun was the one who made it through and not Heather. But let's get into it. So we're going to Final Four fire making.
Cool. Can I say something real quick? Well, I just wanted to say is, I guess, echoing what you said before, Alex, is I do think that this shows we don't need the Final Four fire making, because I don't think it's really all that. Obviously, it's beneficial to win because you have a guaranteed spot. But I think as we're seeing this moves on and on and on, but someone else still has another shot in front of the jury to make one more lasting impression, which is why we shouldn't have it unless it's a 2-2 tie, because now I feel like it's starting to get to the point where, okay, you won Final Four, but if you really want to solidify a move, you have to give up immunity to go beat someone in fire. And I think that's an unnecessary, I guess, issue in the game that just doesn't need to happen.
Like, I don't believe, because now we have this perception now of winning that final immunity means you don't win. And I don't believe that's the case. I just think it's just very circumstantial on these seasons and just how that dynamic panned out. But yeah, so one thing that does happen before fire making that is also something that turned the jury off was Xander actively talking about it and saying, I saw Deshaun do the truth bomb, and everyone was smiling and clapping and like had a positive reaction to him blowing up Erica's game and saying she wasn't good. So it would make sense then to me that Erica's not a good player. And you see everyone in the jury's like all of them at the same time, just like very serious face, like head down, like what are you even saying, man? And you hear them say to each other, like, he does not have a good read on what we're thinking right now. And that was also the editors trying to clue the viewers in on, like, hey, this is a flaw at the moment in Xander's game. I think I'm still on the premise of give Xander a few years, have him come back. He can make those adjustments and win this game, because they're very small adjustments he needs to make to have a winning game. I believe it was just wrong place, wrong time, saying the wrong thing.
Right. And I do want to say, I think if he was able to read their facial expressions in that moment, he might have changed his mind right before actually making his decision. But I want to rewind just real quick about the Final Four challenge. To me, it's almost going to come down to the point where people are going to say, what's the point of even winning the Final Four immunity challenge? Because I think it hurts people that have won it before. And I do think it could be a detriment going forward. So some people might just say, you know what, I'm going to take the risk, not end up winning it, maybe get taken to the end, or show my hand in fire, which then will give me another uptick from the jury if I do win it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the fire making. So we have Deshaun, who's nervous as hell because he hasn't been able to make any true fire. And then we have Heather, who's pretty confident in her ability. And we sort of see that happen in the challenge. And I really feel that Deshaun's game could be very exemplified through how his fire ran throughout this challenge. Starts off strong. Gets that flame, starts going. Heather's having some difficulty. No edit there, Then it starts growing. Then it just fades. Just like it crashes and burns because he smothered it. And that you could place that as like during his temper tantrum part of the game, and where he was allowing his emotions sort of get the better of him and start making some moves that were detrimental to his game. And we see Heather's rising, and it's a very strong flame. And I'm like, every single time I'm looking, I'm like, how is it not breaking? How has that rope not broke yet? And it's continuing to not break, and then it starts fading down. And at the same time it's starting to fade down, Deshaun suddenly gets another burst, and it flames up, and within seconds, his goes off, and then like a second later, hers goes off. Deshaun wins. It was actually a very exciting fire making, one of the more exciting ones to me personally that we've seen. Even though I'm not like a fan of them, it was an enjoyable watch.
It was the second best one, only behind Becky and Sundra, but it's very odd.
Right. I was about to make that plug too, so I'm loving that you brought that up there. My thing is, and I'm just going to bring this up, part of me just wants to know, is the fire making challenge 100% fair? Because yes, you can have the rope being similar and stuff like that, but you also have to think about wind factor and where someone is sitting in particular why they are competing in that. And so I do think that there is a little bit of a flaw in the Final Four fire making challenge, whether or not someone can win it or not. Now, props to Deshaun, 100% won it. He earned his spot in the end, but I'm just, pointing out a couple little points here.
Lauren, are you saying that there's a flaw in the game?
I am absolutely saying there's a flaw in the game.
Well, that sucks. Sucks that there's a flaw in the game. But
do y'all disagree with me or agree with me on that? Like, just saying,
the way I see it is, it's the same. There's no difference between drawing your spots. Like, it's like they didn't just pick like which ones go where. They were told where to go. For this one in particular, sometimes you're good, sometimes you're not. Like, you have a good day, you have a bad day making fire. It's like Tony wasn't good at making fire. Like, he was bluffing the entire time. Then at fire making against Sarah, he was able to pull it out. I
do think that with the fire making skill, like when it comes down to that close, it kind of perfectly shows what Survivor was, is that you need the skill to make it, but when it gets that close, sometimes you just need some luck on your side to pull out ahead.
That's completely fair, but even bringing up a point, I forget what season it was from, but it's just coming to my mind now, where they switch seating positions right before the fire making competition, and then that person that wanted to switch ended up winning. So I just think it's interesting to look at.
It was Wendell. He didn't want to sit in the orange because it was said it was bad luck. So
there you go.
Angela, I think her name was, to go to the purple side.
Yellow didn't win as many challenges as blue did. So it's all fun and games. I love nitpicking these things.
Yeah, but so we see Heather go. Final juror goes against my belief that she was going to be the for sure third place person. But she goes out. We have our final three of Deshaun, Erica, and Xander. And when we come back after an ad break, we will be discussing Final Tribal Council, the format, and our overall thoughts on the season. So we'll be right back.
Ho, 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 gentlemen! The holidays have come early here at Manscaped, the leading men's hygiene brand. Manscaped just launched new products, including their ultra-new, ultra-premium body wash and a 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner. It's time to give yourself or someone who needs it the gift of beautiful skin, hair, and balls this holiday season. Go to manscaped.com and use promo code SURVIVOR for 20% off and free shipping.
Jingle balls to the walls. Fellas, listen up. Untrimmed pubes are a thing of the past, and it's possible you have Santa's beard in your pants. Could be Matt Bischoff's. It's time to leave your significant other some cookies and milk at the bottom of your chimney. I am talking about Manscaped Performance Package 4.0. Oh, now, I had a lot of sex when I got back from my last appearance. I literally had sex 8 times in 12 hours. And, I did some damage down there, fellas. I did some serious damage. I had to call my doctor. There was swelling. There was everything else. It was bad. But you know it wasn't bad? My balls, because I shaved them with Manscaped. Oh, there was the lighting at the top of the tree, but the bottom of the tree looked perfect.
Inside the Performance Package 4.0, you'll find the signature Lawnmower 4.0. This electric trimmer has proprietary advanced skin-safe technology to reduce cuts on your nuts. It's also waterproof, so you can use it in the shower. It's like a gift to your partner with less mess. The Manscaped Performance Package 4.0 also includes the Crop Preserver and Crop Reviver, an anti-chafing ball deodorant, moisturizer, and toner. It's time to keep your North Pole feeling and smelling fresh.
This hygiene bundle will also come with a pair of Manscaped anti-chafing boxers. God bless it. I needed and used that this week. I promise you. The perfect package for your perfect package. Manscaped is going beyond the groin with their new ultra premium body wash. It's infused with aloe vera and sea salt to keep your skin feeling clean, nice, and moisturized.
They also just launched their new 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner, which has key ingredients with benefits that include hydrating, nourishing, conditioning the scalp, and strengthening your hair at the same time. 'Tis the season to load up on Manscaped products. So get yourself, your dad, your brother, your friends, your neighbor, the best gift of all, the Manscaped Performance Package 4.0. Reality NSFW listeners get 20% off and free shipping with the code SURVIVOR at manscaped.com. Every guy out there needs to add Manscaped to their wish list this holiday season.
This is Santa Claus talking to you once again. Get 20% off and free shipping with promo code SURVIVOR at manscaped.com. That is 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use promo code SURVIVOR. Clean up your nuts and make Santa proud this year.
We're all trying to eat better, but healthy breakfast doesn't have to be boring. Magic Spoon has the amazing flavors you love, but without all the bad stuff. And it's amazing as a midnight snack right before bed.
0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving. That's only 140 calories per serving.
It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and low-carb. And build your own box. Available flavors to build your very own custom bundle are cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, blueberry, cinnamon, cookies and cream, and my favorite, maple waffle. Now, Magic Spoon recently brought back their 2 super popular flavors, cookies and cream and maple waffle. Thank goodness. But they're back permanently. And when these flavors were first introduced for a limited time, they sold out extremely quickly. Now, I'm here to let you know you can get them again or try them for the first time. Why? Because they're delicious and indulgent.
Johnny, Magic Spoon has so many great flavors that I really enjoy, and even my kids enjoy them. We have the cocoa, fruity frosted, peanut butter. All these are really great combinations. They enjoy waking up in the morning and getting some Magic Spoon right off to start their day great before they head off to school. I think everybody listening should give Magic Spoon a try, or if you've tried them already, it's time to reorder. Let's get you some more Magic Spoon and get your day started right.
Hey, when I finish a podcast late at night, the first thing I'm thinking is not sleep. It's let me grab a delicious bowl of Magic Spoon before I go to bed.
So go to magicspoon.com/survivor to grab a custom bundle of cereal and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code SURVIVOR at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/survivor and use the code SURVIVOR to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this podcast.
And we are back, and it's time for Final Tribal Council. We get brief moments with all 3 people during the Survivor Breakfast, but we can talk about what they were saying there during Final Tribal because they bring it up again there. First, what do you guys think of the new setup? Where now, instead of just going in, okay, we're doing the outplay portion, we're doing the outwit, the outlast portion, and then they do the open forum. It's just, here's an open forum. Jury, you can ask whatever you want, and then they can answer. Like, this more open forum aspect, what did you guys think?
Go ahead,
Dan,
Lauren.
go ahead. You go first.
Oh. So I do like it. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that miss the one person goes up and asks a question, which I completely understand that. I did enjoy when that happened, but I do think this kind of flowed better as a conversation. I also think what helped it was when they kind of shifted it to going through the 3, there was always 10 people on the jury. And I just think that's too much. I think if you're going to have this open forum somewhere in that 7 to 8 jury members where, yes, you're going to have the people that you hear from more, your bigger characters, but you still got to hear from everyone. And I think it's that's nice, where you get to hear everyone ask questions. And one of the things that I did really like about this final tribal is while some maybe had better than others, it did seem like everyone was getting their fair share of questions, and there wasn't someone that was completely negated.
I actually really enjoyed this format as well, because we've seen 3 different phases in Survivor with how they've done Final Tribal Council. The first one being where each single jury member got to go up, ask their question, and or say their piece. And then we got the outwit, outplay, outlast version. And then we get this version, the open forum, which I am a fan of, because I think anyone that wants to say something or wants to bring up a point is able to do so. And it gave every single person that was in the Final Tribal Council an opportunity to speak their piece. They were all given questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like Evie just breaks the ice, like, and you know, you always have to have someone who does that. But I really appreciate it. The 2 people I appreciated most during this jury segment were, at least from what we were allowed to watch, because obviously, you know, there's a lot more that happened that they just didn't put on the air. Whereas Danny and Ricard, I think they were very good jury members. And honestly, there was parts where when Ricard was talking, I was like, hey, you know, if Jeff doesn't want to host that much longer, I know he does, but if he didn't want to host that much anymore, like, Ricard was doing pretty good at like the questions that would lead someone to give a response. But Danny sort of sets it up in the, okay, you guys didn't do like your opening pitch. Like, I see it like football, you know, like there's sections of the game, pre-merge, the right at the merge, and then final late on. Like, tell me what your game is and what you think you accomplished in those phases. So we start with Xander, and Xander's trying to just, you know, he's trying to highlight the underdog story. So in my notes, I go like, he wanted to play no one else's game. He wanted to play his own game. So we already know Johnny's not a fan of that answer because he hates when he hears people say that in the pregame press. But we like Xander here. So I think it was fine there to say it, because I think people did receive that part well. He's like, I just wanted to come in. I wanted to take risks. And like, I went through this game without votes because I took risks. I was able to get an idol and an extra vote from it. It made my game more difficult, even though like I was this good tribal presence for Yase and helping them win challenges at the end. It was like, we were down in numbers. Everyone knew what advantages I had, so that sort of put me in a powerless position. So then my only move was, I can be a vote. Like, I can be a number for you. And I was able to last long enough where people were able to pull me in as a number, primarily Ricard. So that's him giving Ricard the credit, not Erica, for bringing together the non-Black Alliance, you know. And then his post game was use Ricard as a shield for as long as I can, because I knew once Ricard was gone, eyes would be on me. Ricard goes, I win immunity, and then I get to the end. So what are your initial thoughts on just like that pitch? Like, if that was like his opening remarks, because I'm sort of taking these as your opening remarks on what you think your game was. What did you think of Xander's pitch there?
I thought starting off, it was pretty good. He hit most of the highlights that he needed to. And I think when you're kind of making that opening pitch, you want to save some stuff, you know, that you can bust out later and some answers. So I think as far as an opening pitch was and kind of him explaining his outline portion, you know, bullet point version of his game, I thought he did a pretty good job with that.
I also thought his opening pitch was said quite well, because the things that he did say were giving the jury members opportunity to then consider what he actually did in the game. Therefore, also potentially putting in their minds, okay, let me bring up a question to Xander later on to ask him to elaborate about this certain situation. So I think it's so important to be able to set yourself up with an opening speech, which is going to have people ask you more questions about your game style. If you open yourself up and you don't give them enough, then people are just going to discredit you from the start.
Yep, absolutely. Which then leads us to it's now Deshaun's turn, and pretty much like his entire thing is just like, I came into this game just thinking like, I'm probably not going to be great at the immunities. But I don't care about the immunities. I don't care about the advantages. I care about the social game, which for people who like the old school game, that should be music to their ears. It's like he was focused on building relationships, but building them with as many people as possible, and then being able to use that social capital later on whenever he felt his back was against the wall. And he was trying to also have this idea that he was the glue of his alliances, of his original tribe. Like, he was the reason why they would stay together, which Ricard interjects and goes like, you're saying this, but you said this about Erica. You said you wanted her out. You said you were only playing nice with Heather. You felt Danny wasn't really playing a real game. Like, you didn't help save Sydney. It's like, so what's real here? And it's like when Deshaun's starting to realize the perception of himself from everyone else in the game, and seeing that he's seen in more of a negative light than what he truly anticipated.
I think with Deshaun and his answer, you got a lot of fluff. You got a lot of stuff that on paper, if the jury's not allowed to respond, it all sounds good. But he kind of was just, well, I did, like, as if they didn't fact check while they were at Ponderosa. Right. And so I think he added that fluff, and it just, I don't know. I don't think it hit. I think from there, he kind of set the tone for a lot of questions that were being put his way that made him have to defend himself rather than highlight the positive aspects of his game.
And I think owning your game carries a lot of weight, whether people respect it or not. But you have to say, I did this, this, and that, because Ricard's able to then step in and say, you said all these things. Why are you not owning that this was part of your game? Because I think if Deshaun was able to do that, people on the jury would be like, okay, I can somewhat respect that because he's owning up to everything that he did instead of trying to like hide portions of his game here and there. The one thing that stood out to me was when he was talking about his social game, because I will say, I think he lacked a lot of social game because he turned off so many different people within the game. So that to me isn't a great social game, but I think he did so many other things well, but I don't think him saying his social game was his strong suit was the best direction to go in.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, it's like my theme of this episode and last episode is basically perception, how you perceive yourself, how others perceive you, and how you perceive others. And he had a more of a idea of himself, like sort of how Xander had this idea that he played the best game. Deshaun feels he played the best game because in his mind, he made all these relationships. Like, the reason why he doesn't go out instead of Danny is because of the relationships he was able to forge with Erica and Heather. And he probably believes it's his social ability that was the reason why Ricard only goes at 5 instead of himself. So, like, there's, through results-oriented logic, it would make sense for you on the island, like, deprived of food, deprived of sleep, to think in your mind, that was my social game working. That, like, I believe that was me putting in my work socially and politically to get that done.
Well, and as we go on, we're going to get more into the other questions and some of the things. I think what you see from him and in that answer is what you're going to see from Xander down the line is there's just some lack of awareness. Is, like you said, perception's everything. His perception was off, and his awareness of what people thought about him. I don't think that everyone, I think he thought that his social bonds were a lot tighter with people than what they may have actually been.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I think even to some of the viewers, because for most of the game, I think a lot of people were saying, like, Deshaun's getting a winner at it. Like, Deshaun's playing a hell of a game. Because, like, at the beginning of the season, it was like, oh, Deshaun has that edit, Shan has that edit. But notice how all the people who had those big edits didn't win the game. So, say what you will about that. But let's talk about Erica. Because then Erica's last, and she talks about how she had a lot of expectations for how her game would be. Like, she thought I would just join the bottom of a majority alliance, let it run its course, but then while it's running its course, move my way up through the ranks to the point where I'm in control. But because Luvu kept winning, it was more so she was just seeing the dynamics change within their group to where she felt her and Heather were outside of that 6 original Luvu members. So then that brings her to getting sent to exile, where she feels very alone. She's able to get given an opportunity to save herself for the hourglass, but, like, by doing so creates chaos, and she then is able to get back underneath the radar. And then from there, she's just trying to figure out that original strategy. figure out a way to accumulate a bunch of people, but then get people out that she wants out, and then eventually getting to the point where she's the person in the pivotal spots. And I think she did in her results oriented logic, she did do that. Like, I think the show was trying to show us Ricard had more to say in creating it, but we saw throughout the episodes, like, Erica was a pivotal vote for several of those votes, and who ended up going home. Only one I would really say she wasn't was the Leanna vote, because she didn't want to vote Leanna. She wanted to vote Ricard there, but Xander did strong arm her into voting Leanna by using his extra vote and saying that he would go to Rocks, which was shown in press recently, confirmed, but something I mentioned when it happened during the episode. So just humble brag to myself there for being right. But it's that whole lamb turned into a lion, and you see a lot of the jury shaking their heads, like nodding the approval. Like, you're already starting to see, like, they're behind her. Like, no matter what Ricard said of, like, because he ends up saying, like, I'm being your champion right now. Like, we had a great relationship. You didn't have a relationship with everybody here, though, and so they're not seeing what I saw. And so she's able to explain, while Deshaun was trying to be good with everyone, but also lying to everyone because he's trying to be good with everyone, she was in a position, especially from being on Exile, where she's very good in one-on-one, but not in these big group formats. But, like, she's able to see perception. Like, she was able to use perception in the game to figure out where she needed to be. She knew where people stood, and that was more important than just being liked by everyone.
So I think Erica came on super strong at the beginning of the Final Tribal Council and was building that entire storyline to make her game come ultimately full circle. And I just don't think she ever stopped. She was able to repeatedly, time and time again, explain what her game style was and what she was able to get herself to the end. And I think that is exactly where the other two people, being Deshaun and Xander, were lacking a little bit, because she was just able to counter anything that anyone said to her and was making it seem like, yes, I pulled all the strings. I did these particular moves to get myself to the end. And we've already talked about it before. Was her game perfect? Absolutely not. Nobody's game was perfect. They all had to go through struggles. They all had to adapt to different situations to get them to the end. But I think a lot of weight comes in Final Tribal Council if you're able to sell your pitch to the jury. If you can't do that, then you can't win. You can't just bank on what you think people saw your gameplay was on the island. And if you can't fully tell people what you did sitting at that Final Tribal Council, they're not going to reward you the win. I mean, we've seen it on a couple seasons where it does happen, but time and time again, I think so many jury members come in and factor Final Tribal Council. You have the bitter ones that, are never going to vote for that person regardless of what they say. But I think this jury in particular, everyone came in with a pretty open mind, listening to all three of them and what they had to say.
There's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but I think for the most part, if you can come into Final Tribal Council and you can articulate everything that you did in a really open way that makes everyone understand, and anytime someone comes at you, you can counterpoint and not have to admit, oh, you're right, that's where I was wrong. So I think if you can articulate and you can pivot it to the direction of yourself, that person's going to win the Final Tribal Council most of the time, as long as they have, kind of the facts to back them up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then we get into this portion of Final Tribal, which is the editors once again trying to tell you guys why Xander and Deshaun aren't going to win this game. And I did feel bad for Xander, because I felt like it was just being hammered over his head at this point. Like, here's all the things you did wrong, or like, here's the thing that we perceive that you weren't able to do. And so Tiffany and Leanna are asking him about his social awareness in the game and being able to understand it, and sort of tied in with Evie's question about his idol. And was that social game or was that luck? And in Xander's mind, he feels it was his social game and the relationships he was able to build while he was nervous each tribal and thinking maybe he has to play it, maybe he doesn't need to play it. Ultimately, he trusted the relationships he built and didn't play it until Final Five, when really he didn't even need to play it then. But he did struggle with talking about his social awareness, which I don't blame him for stumbling and stuff. It comes off authentic, at least, where like you're trying to think about it. but it also gives the impression to people just initially of like, oh, he doesn't have any thoughts about it. Like you should be thinking about your final tribal all the time. Like you should have these right there ready to go. But you have to remember these people are fatigued. Like they're not going to be the same as someone who's doing like a speech or like a political debate when they're like fully healthy, you know? But I guess the main question I have for here is like that was obviously a step is showing that maybe he wasn't as socially aware as he thought he was. But do you guys think the idol was being able to hold that idol to 5 was luck? Was it, or what drove it? Like, why was it that he got to bring it to 5? Because a lot of people, like, you know, in the chat and in the audience are like, how are they letting him do this? How are they just letting him walk the final 5 and be locked up for final 4? Is it that he's that good, or is it that they don't perceive him to be a threat?
I don't think they perceived him to be a threat. I think that's how it stays the entire time. And you got to remember, you know, while you're out there, your goal isn't to convince, you know, America or everyone that's watching why you should win. Your goal has to be to convince, in this case, those 8 jurors. So while you're out there and you're playing this game with them, you need to be able to get to know them and read them as to what they value and what they think is most important. And if you can't do that, it doesn't matter if you played this great game. You need to worry about reading those 8 players and doing whatever they think is best, or it doesn't matter what else you do in the game.
Right. And I think it too, I did feel bad for Xander a little bit in this moment too, where and explains to him social awareness, because he wasn't giving them the answer that they were looking for. And you just can see in his facial expression where he's really trying to give them something, but he wasn't giving them what they wanted. And that's the thing that you have to be able to do, is whether it's believable, you have to be able to explain to them, okay, I understand what you're saying. I understand the question. This is my answer. And I do think he did recover somewhat and was able to then give them some sort of an answer. So I commend him for being able to do that, because I think some people would have froze in that moment and just would have stopped talking right then and there and would not have even been able to recover. So you have to give props for being able to do that, in especially that intense of a moment where you have lack of sleep, lack of food. So saying that Xander totally fumbled final tribal council, he didn't. He just had his moments where he just wasn't able to give the jury exactly what they were looking for. Now, in a different season, anything he could have said at this final tribal council, another jury could factor that and say, you know what, that's the answer I was looking for. But it's all comes down to the 8 members that were sitting on this jury today with what they were going to decide, their criteria and who they were voting for.
And I think a lot of it comes back to, Alex, I know you've been saying this for the past few weeks and even brought it up tonight, of his age probably has a lot to do with it. And I think this is one of the instances where it shows. I mean, think about it, 20. How many times are you really pressed in a high pressure situation like this? And it's probably something that he maybe has never experienced, or if he has, once or twice. And that's something that you get more comfortable with speaking about as you kind of get older and you go through more stuff and mature. And so I think this was the hiccup, but I think that I think that's where it showed a little bit. But he was trying the best he could. You can't take anything away from him. It was just didn't work out for him this game.
Right. And then we get Ricard and Heather, and Ricard saying to Xander, like we had a good connection. Like, I honestly, I think I can get past the fact that you voted me out, strategically reasoning. But if that was the reason why is she sitting there? Why didn't you put her in fire and try to get her out? Or, you know, or why didn't you put her in and compete against her and try to take her out? Because we all knew she was the next threat after I was gone. Why didn't you do it? And Heather then interjects as well and says, like, I told you yesterday before we went to tribal, the only person that would beat you at the end is Erica. And like, this is another moment where Xander's like, well, my impression from what I saw the jury responding to was that they didn't think Erica had a good game. So obviously that could be a fallacy in my game, and I can take ownership of it. But at the time, I just knew I couldn't beat you, Ricard, so I needed to make sure you were gone. And I thought I had a better chance competing against Erica and not giving her that chance to make fire and boost her resume more. Because I felt overall we may have had similar resumes, but at that point I felt my resume was better.
I know they're different topics, but do you think Ricard asked that question if Xander doesn't float the idea of potentially playing the idol for him?
I think so.
Do. Yeah, I agree with Alex. I think he does. The thing I enjoyed about Ricard in this final tribal council was he was not afraid to call people out for any type of bullshit, because at the end of the day, he was trying to get the answers that he wanted to hear. And sometimes sitting at the final tribal council, whether you mean it necessarily, sometimes just say what they're looking for. And that could help you, because you don't always have to be super truthful at final tribal council. Yeah, do I think you should own your game? Of course. But at the same time, if you know one person is looking for a particular answer, sometimes maybe just give it to them and see what happens.
Only thing I'll say is I'm disappointed for as many people in this season that put down that, oh, they wanted to play like Todd. I did not see a Todd jury speech out there anywhere.
Oh my gosh.
No, at least none that we saw. But the winner was someone who put Todd as their favorite player. Erica, I remember that one for sure. So now,
yeah, but you don't have your Courtney and Amanda sitting with you at the end, so not even close to a Todd game.
Well, it's sort of the opposite. It's a girl sitting next to two guys and winning.
Well,
that's not something we see.
No,
on Survivor.
I mean, I think you do get some parallels there for the fact that Xander's almost like an Amanda, like did not have a great final tribal council,
but was strong. Could do performances, was part of the strategic game.
You're going to have to come back to me as how I relate Deshawn to Courtney, but I can at least make that one.
Yeah, I was going to say, Deshawn does not relate to Courtney. No one has better one-liners than Courtney.
I feel like we will have seen more one-liners from Ricard. I feel Ricard could have some of that Courtney sass in him.
That's fair.
But so we get to a sensitive topic here now where it's Shan wants to clear the air with Deshawn, because she was saying how, like, while we bickered and there was moments where we may have wanted to get each other out, I felt you kept pushing the bigger picture on us. And like, were you using our unity as like the Black community as a tool to hijack the rest of our games in order to support you? Because like, that goes beyond game. That's something that's uncoupled. And like Deshawn at this point is just like, look, my answer here is going to be straight from the heart. Like, I don't care. Give me no votes. Make me third place finalist. Let me say it right here. It was never my intention to do that. Like, our relationship was so real, and sometimes my emotions, my temper tantrums got in the way because I felt like I wasn't being listened to. So then I dug in further, and I see how I was coming across to all of you. But I would never do something like bringing our community in that, because I would never go against my people like that. I felt it was also fitting to have this question in here because it was a big factor of this season and talked about so much that I feel like it did need to be talked about, even if it was just for these few minutes at Final Tribal. But what were your thoughts, Dan?
I do think it was necessary to show it because obviously that was such a big moment, and you could tell from some behind the scenes stuff that Shan was kind of really bothered and hurt by that. And so, you know, no matter what your opinion is of the conversation, I personally enjoyed seeing it in there. And I think it's something that you needed to have. And I think he needed that chance to explain himself because, as you know, it's been your word tonight, Alex, perception is she perceives something the wrong way. But when it comes at that magnitude, I think Deshawn does need to have the chance to kind of course correct so that they can work that out.
Right. I think it was absolutely important that they had that entire conversation in there because it gives Deshawn an opportunity to clear the air. And the moment that he said that, you could just see it in his facial expression that he didn't realize that anyone could even think that that was a reason that he was going behind their backs for particular different reasons and pushing a motive just to get himself further in the game. And when he said, give me third, you could just tell in his voice that the game didn't matter. His relationship with Shan mattered. And I'm glad that we were able to see that. And you could see in Shan's eyes that she's like, okay, I know my relationship with Deshaun is good, and he wasn't trying to do another agenda to get himself further in the game. So absolutely, it needed to be in there, and I'm happy Deshaun was able to have that moment where he could explain himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Which gets us towards the end of the final travel when Danny once again wants to speak up, and he's like, I want to address you, Erica, personally. Like, you played the game I wanted to play. You were good at competitions, but you were constantly underestimated, and you were able to use that to your benefit. And, congrats to you. Like, that was what I wanted to do, play this game. And you hear multiple other people in the jury go, yep. Like, I feel like Tiffany, Evie, Liana, like, all of them were just like, yeah, like, me too. I wanted to play your game. So it's like there when you already know she's going to win. It's just a matter of what do you think the vote's going to be. But I like that Danny, like, even if I don't know where Danny voted. Like, we don't know who that one vote for Deshaun was. I assume Danny voted for Deshaun just out of like respect for his brother, or like his survivor brother in the game. But I'm glad that he gave her flowers, because they were deserved. Like, it just shows, like, no matter what we perceive it to be, people know a winning game when they see one on the island. And they all were like, damn, I could have played that game, or I should have been able to play that game, but she was able to do it.
Right.
Well,
and I will go ahead, Dan. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it just shows, like, going back that, everyone talks like, all right, I made it to the merge. Now I need to control this game. No, you don't. Just make sure you're all right and put yourself in a good social situation, because you don't want to take control of the game at the merge. That never works out anymore.
Yeah, and I'm also going to just say this too. Like, there's going to be so many people that are going to say that Erica doesn't deserve her win, but she absolutely does. If you win your season, you won your season, you did something right in order to be able to win. And you do hear people oftentimes say this person absolutely never should have won. But who are we to say that as viewers if we weren't out on the island? We are not seeing every single thing that happens. All the people that are out there are seeing it. Yes, jury members get voted off. They don't, they're not with the people on the island that make it all the way up until final tribal council, but they get to hear from all other jury members that come out of the game, get to witness what they witnessed out there. And so they're feeding off of information. So just remember that we are not seeing everything. So you have to be able to respect the decision that the jury does make, because that's the game that they saw, and that's what they consider to be a winning game.
Mm-hmm. And I know, like, there's also going to be perception out there that some of these votes were just so that a woman would win the game. Mm-mm. I don't want to discredit Erica's game like that. And you know what? If that's the jurors' motive to voting, like, you may not agree with it, but that's their right to vote how they choose. It's like how we all vote in real life. It's your vote. You get to do with your vote what you want to do with it. And we see that vote as a 7-1-0 vote. Erica gets 7 votes. She's the winner of season 41 of Survivor. They reveal it live, a la Borneo. Obviously, we know it's because they didn't want to potentially have to reveal it through a Zoom finale reunion, because they did not know what the landscape of the world would be. I liked it. I loved having that. Like, if you're not going to be able to have a live reunion show, I love the idea of just revealing it live to them right at that moment.
Well, and I think you also get more authentic reactions, because, I mean, you even hear a lot of people say that, oh, yeah, by the time, like, most of them know, unless you're Mike Scoopin, if you've won or lost the final tribal council. So, like, I think you also get that genuine reaction from them where I'm sure they haven't quite processed, like, did I win? How did I do? And so I think everything you see it's just pure emotion.
Yeah, the emotion right then and there is so raw, and you can see just in their facial expressions, because also when the final vote is read, the winner is announced, but then you also see too, oh my gosh, the game is now over. So you take that other sigh of relief, whether you won the game or not. So kudos to Erica, great game, winner of this season. And I think people just need to respect that she is the winner, because in the jury's eyes, she played the best game.
Absolutely. And so like we're not going to be covering the after show. Obviously we started running a little bit after they were starting that. I haven't seen any of it other than the first couple minutes. But we will wrap this up with just talking about this season as a whole. Like, I know there's going to be the extremists out there like, oh, it's the worst season ever. They had the hourglass into this, and we don't like the winner. And so we think she was a bad player, even though there's no reason to think that truly. I'm not going to be here like waving my flag saying season 41 is the best season ever. But I enjoyed it mainly because of the cast. It comes down a little bit for me for some of the twists that were in this game that I just think ultimately were duds or unnecessary to have in the game. I know you have very different opinions than me about the twists, Dan. But like, what are your general thoughts on the season as a whole?
Okay, to be fair, a lot of the times when I brought it up, I was just playing contrarian. I wasn't saying that I loved any of these twists by any means.
No, I heard Dan loved the hourglass.
Yeah, it was my idea. Wrote it into Probes, told him it'd be fun. Pass it with Mike White. No, I think what I was trying to preach throughout most of the season was let it play out. Because week by week, everyone was freaking out of like, there's too many advantages. There's too many this. I hate that. What are they doing? They're ruining the show. And do you have to like all those advantages? No, I don't even like all those advantages. But I think it's important to see how it all played out, because one of the things that they did do is, at least in the second half, it wasn't all advantage filled and everyone got an idol. So I think you just have to wait and to see how it all plays out before you judge the season. Because that's like turning a movie off 30 minutes in, being like, it's trash. Like, yes, you can do that with some movies, but for the most part, like, it got paid. It got felt like it's probably leading somewhere. So I do think overall it was a good season, just in spite of all these twists that were your favorite, Alex. I think it was because of the cast, and the cast is what saved the season. I think it's what made it a good season. I'm not going to say that it's a top tier season. I'd really have to think about, where it would be if it's, top half, bottom half, wherever. But I think overall it was a solid season, and it's the first season we got with, like an 18-month break or whatever it was. Like, just enjoy that it was back and it's there, and we're going to get season 42.
And we're going to, unfortunately, just based off press, like, we're probably going to see similar, if not the same things pop up again in 42, because I do believe production still doesn't understand that, like, how much of a home run they hit casting wise, which made 41 a better experience for me. My reasoning for making seasons good or bad are based almost entirely on the cast themselves, not necessarily the season that they're playing in. Like, Redemption Island's a bad season not because of Redemption Island. It's bad because it's a bad cast.
Oh, the cast sucked.
Like, this is a really great cast, but if you put Redemption Island cast into this season, this is a very bad season to watch. They need to realize what they're doing in casting is working. Like, they're bringing in characters, they're bringing in game players and different types, not just diverse people in terms of ethnicity, but diverse players in terms of thought of how the game should be played. And I find that fascinating. And that's why I enjoy the season. And Lauren, like, I want to give you a chance to, like, sort of give your thoughts on it.
Sure. And I just want to start off by saying, like, everyone is always going to complain about something. There's going to be a negative aspect to every season. No season is perfect. But remember the positives. And as we just talked about here, cast was phenomenal. So many great game players. And you can't get that twisted, because many seasons that we have seen prior to this, we talked about it, the cast isn't great and they can't carry the season. This cast 100% could completely carry the season. And this season wraps up for me middle of the road, because as I said, there were some high points, there were some low points. But at the same time, I was glad Survivor was back. I was engaged every single episode, whether there was too many twists in that episode or not. I still enjoyed it. I hyped up the season. And my thing is, if you're going to complain about it, then why are you still watching? I think there's so many good elements that Survivor does provide, and it's a forever changing game. And there's going to always be twists and turns and new elements into each and every single season. And we also have to realize, I think they threw a lot of twists and advantages at us this season to kind of test them out to see which ones would work and which ones wouldn't work. And let's remember this. Final 6, we didn't have crazy advantage plays all over the place. Most of these votes on this season were pure votes where an advantage didn't play a factor. So just because there's a ton of advantages floating around doesn't mean it's going to impact the season, because it didn't impact this season in particular with people getting screwed over by them. So just remember those small little moments. Overall, I did enjoy the season. I'm excited to see what season 42 has to offer, and I'm just hoping the cast on that season can deliver just as good as this cast did.
I'm more interested to see how, not even because season 42 doesn't get to see this. They don't get to see any of this, so they'll also be taking this on very new, very fresh. I'm interested to see what they bring back for 43 this upcoming spring when they film, and more importantly, the players that they cast, how they respond to seeing the season, and then how do they play and how do they react and how does the game change, because now you have to have these other expectations. Because we've been saying, and Johnny's been saying, like, I feel if people take a couple months away and they come back to this season and they watch it in a binge, this is going to be a very wild ride. Like, you can just the results already. Enjoy the experience. It's like putting Kagayan. Like, I'm not comparing it to Kagayan, but I'm just saying the sense of they put it on Netflix in a binge style of filming, and I brushed through it with my family who never seen it in 2 days, and they just loved it. And I think that's what they're going for now. They're going for that. They're going for long-term storytelling. So unfortunately, some people that are being under-edited, like our winner, the long story was starting at that hourglass. And the story was her being quiet. So in their sense, they're like, oh, well, we're playing into the narrative. We gave her a quiet edit in the beginning of the game. Then it starts to roar. Then she starts getting more confessionals, more involvement in what the votes are going to be. And we get our winner. But that,
can I ask you both a question, though? Because to me, the best way to sum this up as well, roller coaster of a season. I'm more engaged in a season that is not predictable. And this season was nothing but predictable. I think coming into this finale, people had no idea who was going to win. People had their favorites, of course, and people thought based on the edit, this person was going to win or this person might not win. I just think they did a great job editing it in the sense of we were unknown about what was going to happen coming into this finale. And I hate going into a finale saying, yeah, this person's going to win if they 100% get to the end.
I came into Final Five with preconceived ideas that it was going to be Ricard or Erica winning. That's someone like me who just tries to read too much into the edit sometimes. But there were moments throughout it where I kept starting to question what I was thinking going in. And that is a good job on them. While I have issues with some of their editing decisions, they did make some other really good editing changes to this show for the better to make it more unknown, or at least their red herrings were more believable this season to me than in past seasons.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the issue that you have is there's not many level-headed people on the internet. So it's got to be the best or it's got to be the worst. Yeah. And it's all right to be like, that was pretty good.
Yeah, we can have middle of the road seasons. It's okay. We don't have to have top tier. It doesn't have to be the bottom tier. But this to me, I think people saying worst season ever, come on.
It's just it's just people that are mad for the sake of being mad. And that, if their kink is hate watching, then you know what, continue to hate watch. We'll still be here covering it. But that does wrap up our coverage on Reality NSFW for season 41. However, it's not going to be the end that you see these three people here on your screens. And in the off season, there is going to be more coverage. And I would love for you to provide that to the viewer.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this. So in the off season, Survivor is not going anywhere. Us three are going to be back talking through some different what if scenarios. We're going to be doing some lists. We're going to have some special Survivor guests on, and we're just going to dive deep into some things that people don't necessarily talk about. And Dan, I know you really want to share what we're looking for with our what if scenarios.
Yeah, what ifs? I mean, let's face it, if you're listening, watching a Survivor podcast, you're probably pretty much a super fan. So like every super fan, you go back and think, what if this had gone the other way? And we're not talking about just ridiculous vote offs, but things like where it was, tribe swaps, medevacs, quits, or just, rock draws, anything where it literally could have gone either direction. And we're just going to break down, what if it had gone the other way? How would that affect the rest of the season? How would it affect the potential winner? And in some scenarios, how would it affect how Survivor's legacy is as a whole? So we have plans to do that. We're going to be trying to bring in a lot of guests that were actually there to give us some, feedback where they can provide more of behind the scenes stuff. So we're getting the most accurate information, or if not, just bringing on some other people that just love to talk Survivor.
Absolutely. And if you want to help us create ideas, feel free to reach out to any of us or Reality NSFW in general with ideas of what your what ifs are, things that you want us to go into the rabbit hole and truly dig and dissect every little part of.
Or a special guest that you want to see come on that we could hear from that we haven't heard from in quite a while.
Yeah, we will love to do anything and everything off-season related. And while we will be doing that, we are also going to be wrapping up tomorrow the challenge Spies, Lies, and Allies. Lauren and I will be back podcasting about that. I do not know what Johnny's schedule is, but considering he's doing an after party right now and for the finale, I do not think he's going to have time to watch the episode. So we will be back tomorrow at 4:30 to cover the finale of the challenge Spies, Lies, and Allies. Really see who wins TJ's final. And on Mondays, you'll still find us at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time covering the challenge All-Stars 2 that you can watch with us on Paramount Plus, where you can also watch the last three most recent seasons of Australian Survivor. And if you become a patron at adfree.nsfw.com, that is adfree.nsfw.com, you can become a patron of Reality NSFW. That's the best way to support the podcast, other than, liking, subscribing, and hitting that bell for all notifications if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribing on your on your local podcatcher that you use to listen to your podcasts. We do some patron shows. Johnny and Matt do a patron Q&A where the patrons get to ask anything and everything. There are no limits to what you can ask, and it's their favorite podcast of the week. But they also are going to be doing patron coverage of Australian Survivor, as we have Matt watching Australian Survivor for the first time. He's fell in love watching Australian Survivor 2017 and 2018, and they will soon be starting Australian Survivor 2019, which is on Paramount Plus. So you will not need to go through jank links trying to find a one that works in order to watch along with everyone, but they'll be breaking down weekly coverage of that. There's so much going on Reality NSFW and so much more that is to come. But that wraps up today's podcast. I just want to thank Dan and Lauren for being here for me, filling in for Johnny and Matt. I hope you both had a great time. And with that, we're going to hear some words from the sponsors, and we will see you next time. Good night, everyone.
Lucy Nicotine is a company founded by Caltech scientists and former smokers looking for a better and cleaner nicotine alternative. Finally, tobacco alternatives that don't suck.
Researched and developed for 3 years to be made for people, not patients. Lucy has created a nicotine gum with 4 milligrams of nicotine that comes in 3 flavors: wintergreen, cinnamon, and pomegranate. Lucy also has a lozenge with 4 milligrams of nicotine in cherry ice flavor. Each and every flavor actually tastes great, and it's convenient and discreet. Products can be enjoyed anywhere, on flights, at work, on the go, or even in the gym.
I am so happy that Lucy is sponsoring us. Ever since they came on board, I have gotten no less than 5 of my friends transitioned over to Lucy and put their cigarettes down. They like the gum. I'm used to seeing the packages all around. This stuff is great, and it's really helping people make much healthier choices. So get on board and join the Lucy movement.
Hey, it's 2021. Get rid of your cigarettes, unplug your vape, throw out your dip, and get some Lucy nicotine gum or lozenges. This is the real deal. A subscription to Lucy comes directly to your door each month. It's so simple that you don't even have to leave your house because Lucy has delivery down.
Reality NSFW listeners, go to lucy.co and use promo code SURVIVOR to get 20% off all products, including gum or lozenges. That's lucy.co and use promo code SURVIVOR at checkout. Also, I have to give this disclaimer. Warning, this product contains nicotine derived from tobacco. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. That's lucy.co, and be sure to use that promo code SURVIVOR.
This episode of Reality NSFW is sponsored by Blue Chew. Say it with us, Blue Chew. Blue Chew is making waves and bringing more confidence to the bedroom by offering chewable tablets that can help men get stronger and longer lasting erections. That's right, we're giving away super hard dicks.
Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Blue Chew's tablets help men achieve harder, stronger erections to combat all forms of ED.
Blue Chew is an online prescription service, so no visits to the doctor offices, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. And it ships right to your door in a discreet package. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And the best part, it's all done online.
Blue Chew's licensed medical providers work with you to find the right ingredient and strength for your prescription. Don't like swallowing pills? No problem here. Blue Chew's sildenafil and tadalafil tablets are chewable. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA and they prepare and ship direct, so it's cheaper than a pharmacy.
Hey, if you're looking to give that immunity idol to someone, or you don't want to be voted out of a crater, don't worry, Blue Chew's got you covered. So if you could benefit from extra confidence when it's time to perform, visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information.
And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use promo code SURVIVOR at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's Blue Chew, BlueChew.com, promo code SURVIVOR to receive your first month free